It's just people acting like people really do. And for whatever reason, that just tickles my fancy when it comes to films.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the 2000 drama You Can Count on Me, written and directed by Kenneth Lonergan. And I am honored to welcome to the show Dames Marvs. Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So this is a big deal for me because I've had your two co-hosts from CF3 on the show, so I'm finally able to complete the set. And I know we were yeah, exactly. We've been trying to coordinate this for a while, and we were always going to talk about this movie, and we'll get into that in a second. But for people that don't know, tell them a little bit about CF3.
Well, CF3 is Cult Films, Fans, and Finds. We're a podcast about 54 episodes in at the time of this recording. We just interviewed Lar Park Larson from Friday the 13th, Part 7 tonight, actually right before I joined this call. We wrapped that episode. It's fantastic. She's a childhood crush of mine and my brother's both. But we specialize in cult films, as the other two guys have represented us on here as well. And you know, it's funny because I think some of the films that we've done, like Goonies, may not be a cult film, but the first four letters of culture is cult. So that's how I explain it away. I don't know that the other guys would agree with me, but it is what it is. And we just have a lot of fun, you know, basically trying to get anybody that will listen to us to jump on and review movies that they were in. And it's worked out really well so far.
Yeah, I think I talked with Dane and possibly even Jeff about, well, what do you all consider a cult movie? But I think it's basically just anything that has a devoted fan base that's really passionate about it, and it helps if it's not particularly in the mainstream, you know. So yeah, any of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or things like Star Wars, even things like that. I don't even know if they would necessarily be. I mean, obviously they have rabid fan bases, but they're so mainstream that it's just become popular culture at that point. It's not even like a cult favorite or anything of that nature. So I know you did a big special episode on The Shining, and then moments ago when we were getting ready for this call, I asked you what your favorite movie was, and you said The Shining. So I have to know, what did you think of Dr. Sleep?
Well, I went to see Dr. Sleep. I took my family to it, to the premiere before it came out, about a week and a half before it came out, maybe a couple weeks before it came out. And, you know, I'm not a book guy, so I didn't follow the books.
Right.
I know a lot of people, their disconnect from The Shining is it's not as good as the book, et cetera, but you have to be able to separate those things. One's a film, and one's a book. So you can love both without having to hate the other. And I think once people realize that, this movie, Dr. Sleep, was a continuation of a movie that didn't follow the book. So we're already in territory for people to hate it, because they're going to have to base this script and this film on a movie that didn't follow its original book. Mm-hmm. So I went in knowing that The Shining was my favorite movie of all time. So I, of course, was like building it up in my mind as being incredible. I walked out of that film thinking, I was watching the trailer, and again, I'll try and avoid spoilers here, but I was like, man, I'm watching the trailer and so much of this stuff seems awesome to me, and so much of it is confusing because I hadn't read the book. And when I walked out of there, I was like, okay, they explained everything in the trailer that I thought was wonky and possibly going to ruin the movie for me. They explained it perfectly and how it fit in. I loved it. I mean, it didn't jump into my top 10 or anything like that, not like the Peanut Butter Falcon did, but it certainly held its own. I bought it right away. I own it, and I'll watch it many times over. The director's cut is actually better than the theatrical version, in my opinion.
I was going to ask that because I saw it in theaters, and I loved it also, and I think it does a great job of, from my understanding, it kind of splits the difference between the, being reverential towards Kubrick's film, but also kind of honoring, King's book in some ways, and also, being a sequel to both the book and the movie. And I think it kind of splits the difference in an interesting way. But I was wondering about the director's cut, because I actually haven't picked it up on Blu-ray yet, and I've heard it's a vast improvement.
Yeah, the thing that's actually most fascinating to me about the film was the scenes that there were from the original film.
Yeah,
were all reshot. Like the only thing he took from the original film is the blood in the elevator, because that's just, why would you even try to reshoot that?
Exactly.
But everything else, the kid and the bike and all that stuff, he reshot it, and it stands up. I loved it. I mean, I guess it's not really a spoiler because the book's been out forever, but the people that eat the people that have the shining, that's just, I had no idea that that's where they were going to go with Rose the Hat. Because like I said, I hadn't read the book, and I was extremely happy with how it all went down.
Yeah.
So Ewan McGregor was a great casting choice as well.
I thought it was really, I think it built upon The Shining in interesting ways, but also did very much its own thing. Like, it doesn't, it's not treading any of the same ground, but expanding on it. And like you said, the whole thing with them kind of, they call it steam when they're absorbing the I guess energy from people with the shine. And that scene with Jacob Tremblay, not to get into too many spoilers, that's so intense. It was really good. I thought Mike Flanagan did a great job with it, and I think we both encourage people to definitely check that out, because it unfortunately did really bad at the box office. Like, it was a huge kind of bomb, which is, I don't know, they didn't market it properly, if it's like a Birds of Prey situation where people didn't know what the movie was exactly, or what the deal was. Would you have any theories on that?
I mean, I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that it bombed, honestly.
It'll be a cult movie. You guys can cover it someday.
Well, think about this. I told you my second favorite movie of all time was The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
And that was a box office failure.
Very true.
It did not come into prevalence until it hit home video. So, I mean, maybe there's something to that. I guess I don't really care what the majority likes. Like, I loved it, and I got it. It's there for me. So, shame on the people that didn't go see it, I guess.
In a way, it might have a longer shelf life this way. Like you're saying, people will discover it, as opposed to, until recently, what was the biggest movie of all time? Avatar. How many times have people generally gone back and rewatched Avatar? People like chomping at the bit for the 17 Avatar sequels that James Cameron is working on, So I think there's something to that, and in that people want to take ownership of something that they're discovering in their own way, as opposed to having studios cram it down their throat. You need to see this in theaters. It's an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I think that feels like a kind of a decent transition, because You Can Count on Me, which is a very small movie, and it did well in theaters, but it wasn't like a box office sensation by any means. So then we transition over to that and listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
I got a postcard from you from Alaska.
Yeah, I was out there for a little while.
That was in the fall, Terry.
I was in jail for a little while.
What? Maybe you should stay home for a while.
Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea. I got $100 here. Says me and my nephew can beat anybody in here. Only we gotta get the next game because he's gotta be in bed by 10 o'clock.
What are you doing taking him to play pool in the middle of the night and then telling him to lie to me about it?
There's nothing to do here. It's a dull, narrow town full of dull, narrow people.
What are you talking about?
I have no idea.
You're a very important person to Rudy, and you are the most important person to me.
A lot of people come to see me with all kinds of problems. Drugs, alcohol, marital problems, sexual problems.
Good job you had, man.
Well, I like it.
That was a little bit of the trailer for You Can Count on Me, written and directed by Kenneth Lonergan from 2000. So, Dames, tell me, what is it about this movie that connects to you so much that you knew as soon as we talked about having you on the show, you're like, well, you can count on me. Earmark me for that one.
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me this question. And I honestly, it's a brother-sister story. I don't have a sister, so I don't have that connection. They lose their parents in the first 2 minutes of the movie. I have both my parents. So I honestly can't tell you on an emotional level why this movie has connected with me, but I can tell you the kind of movies that I am drawn to are people's stories that are just a section of people's lives. Like if you watch this film, it's just a section of these people's lives and their story. There's no explosions. There's no CGI or special gimmicks. It's just a story. And those are the types of movies that just, I mean, they crush me when, especially when, you know, things happen throughout the course of that part of the story. But I mean, I honestly, I don't know what it is that makes me love this. I mean, I can tell you a million things why I love this movie, but the overall reason that I love this movie, I'm still searching for that answer myself.
I think there's something to be said I think about the sibling bond, because, you know, I also have both my parents and I don't have a sister either, but there's something very true about that relationship that you have, even when you're like can't stand your sibling, you still love them. So there's like that complicated nature out there that I think the movie captures really well. It's also, I noticed just in the beginning of the movie that like certain details that I thought were really interesting, like when we're cutting to Sammy's, you know, office, and like the stickers on the door are like slightly ajar, and like the dialogue is very realistic and the performances are very natural. You know, there's a certain like fly on the wall element to it that it doesn't feel stylized at all. It just like you said, it feels like a slice of life of these people, and it just feels grounded in a way that a lot of movies don't, as far as the relationships, and nothing's really heightened or exaggerated. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I actually have an example of something that I'd like to point out that I believe is a perceived flaw in the film, which you don't normally find in something that you have rated as your third favorite film of all time. But because it is, I can bring this up. When I first saw this movie, the opening scene, it seems so writery to me. Mm-hmm. Like the two parents are in the car, and the first thing that happens is the mom looks at the dad and says, "Why is it that they give a teenage girl braces at the very time that she's most self-conscious?"
Right.
Like that to me is like the writer's gratuity. Like he's like telling you, "I'm smarter than you. I'm going to write this clever line," and then they're going to die in a fiery car crash. Mm-hmm. And I just always thought that was like, I was like, I'm going to hate this movie when I first saw that, but I did not know what was going to come after that, obviously. So I always look at that and I laugh because I love it and I don't like it at the same time. Mm-hmm. But do you feel what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Like,
it's sort of almost,
I'm a smart writer.
It's sort of showboaty, and I think in a way kind of, I don't know, maybe slightly emotionally manipulative. It's that it's you know, trying to hook you with these parents, and it's like, nope, just kidding, they're dead now. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's you know, probably an argument some people could make about Lonergan's movies that they are kind of have that emotional, you know, manipulation to them. I've never seen Margaret, but I have seen Manchester by the Sea, and both this and that movie deal like with very heavy fallout from tragedy. In this, it's the car crash and the parents, and that it's, you know, what happened with his family and everything. So, or his kids. So I think it's, yeah, there's a universal experience there in that he's trying to get at with the tragedy. I can't talk. The tragedy element of it, and I think that. I feel you. I think that's a legitimate kind of criticism, but I give him points immediately after for the misdirection where the cops show up at the door, and you think, like, I at least thought that was Laura Linney's character, but it's actually the babysitter. Little things like that,
right?
Or the music kind of cutting over the funeral because we don't really need to hear what they say. It's just kind of mundane bullshit. Just like a few minutes later, she's talking to. Laura Linney's character, Sammy, is talking to Matthew Broderick, and she's talking about her son, and he's like, "That's a terrific age." It's like that, the kind of boring bullshit things that people say to each other that really kind of mean nothing, just to fill silence, basically. And I think that those kinds of things are Lonergan is so good at.
I agree. I love his casting choices and everything. Like the first thing that strikes me as like an amazing aspect of acting in this film is when the cop shows up at the door and he can't say anything. He just looks at her, and like the look on his face says more than any of the words he could say possibly could. So, I mean, that alone at the very beginning, I'm like, all right, I'm back in.
Yeah. And
then you see the kids blurry, the little curly head, dark haired kid and this blonde girl blurry in the background. That's another nice touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the way he handles that kind of stuff. And then of course we jump significantly. They're like 30 years later or 25 years later, whatever, and they're grown up. And let's talk about Laura Linney in this movie, Oscar nominated, by the way, as was the screenplay. Yeah. This was probably a huge career moment for her. I mean, this was, I think, her. I don't know if she's gotten any other Oscar nominations since then. I feel like she did get another one for Kinsey or something. But let's talk about her performance in this movie and how obviously Sammy, we start off and it's just like a small town and she's like a good mom and she's trying to do her best. And the character is revealed as the movie goes on to be very, tender and very delicate in her relationship and her connection with her son and her connection with her brother, which we'll get to in a second, but is also very complex and sort of self-sabotaging and things like that. So let's talk a little about what, her performance in this and the way that they give such depth to that character.
Sure. So some of the depth that you're talking about clearly shows in the fact that she basically would have been his mother figure growing up, and how he took that for granted, as you're not my mom, you did a great job. And he still kind of looks at her as a motherly type of character, but then how different their paths went because of that. I mean, that's a story that's told inside of the story, and it's another layer of depth that just adds brilliance to this screenplay.
Yeah, and it's basically, I think Lonergan's trying to show two different reactions to the tragedy that they suffered. One just like locks in place as like neurotic and not controlling, but I guess kind of controlling and like trying to get, a handle of the situation and make the best of it and put on a smile. And the other one just rebels and just goes off doing his own thing, getting, from one job to the next, getting in, bar fights, ending up in prison and all this other stuff, and kind of rebelling against everything. So it's like she leans into being stuck in this town, and he just goes the opposite route. And I think that's very true. That's very, everybody has a different way that they react to things. And the movie, even though it is kind of ham-handedly, shoehorning in the car crash in the beginning, it just underlines everything else. And it doesn't even really come up often in conversation, in that the way that they're dealing with everything, with the, their relationship with each other and the people in their lives. I think it comes up a couple of times. It's specifically in the diner where he says something about like, I miss mom. And she's like, yeah, no one knows what to do with you. And that whole thing. And that's where you're, like you were saying, that's where her being kind of the mother figure comes in, where she's immediately like, scolding him for, you were in jail, and like they're having a big argument about it, and he feels like he has to explain himself, and he hates that he feels like he has to explain himself. But at the same time, she's so eager for a connection with her brother, the only person that understands the pain that she's going through, that she like gets all dressed up and she like takes the day off work and she makes it like a big event, telling everybody that she knows that he's coming to town, because they're pushing each other away in some ways, but they're also like, they're the only people that they really need in their lives, I guess.
Exactly. And I notice, maybe an underlying resentment in the fact that she's settled down and stable, and he sees that and resents that. And she resents the fact that she's the one that was settled down and stable so that he could go out and be this crazy wild guy experiencing the world. So, I mean, those are real things that happen to real people all the time. And I think the world of how he was able to write that and how they were able to act it.
Yeah, yeah. And then she's got her boyfriend, kind of, Bob. She's only like, when she's sitting around and she's horny or she's bored, she's like, I wonder what Bob's up to. And that, like, there's not really, she's like, I think she's afraid of making a legitimate emotional connection with anyone, basically. Just because she's so locked into like this protective mode. And meanwhile, he just feels like he has to constantly prove himself. I mean, his first scene, I wrote down here that he's telling Sheila, who we find out later tried to kill herself. He's like, I'm not the kind of guy everyone says I am. And I feel like that's a good transition into Mark Ruffalo, who, again, him really made, like, Laura Linney had been in things before this. She was in, like, The Truman Show and, like, if people remember Congo, movies like that. But Mark Ruffalo, like, this was his big breakthrough. This was way before, obviously, the Marvel stuff and Spotlight and 13 Going on 30 and all the other hit movies he was in. This was his big, like, announcement to the world. And what a performance for him showing up in this.
Dude, you're not even kidding. I think if he would have done anything else of significance before this, he's also up for an Oscar for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just tell you a little bit about how I feel about Mark Ruffalo. Like, to me, she's great. He steals the show in this movie, and in a testament to his acting, there was a movie called Shutter Island.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where he was with DiCaprio. And in that film, I remember watching it the first time, and it's a twister, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on through the film. I was thinking, watching that movie, I'm like, dude, Mark Ruffalo is one of the greatest actors in the known universe, and he's blowing it in this film. But then you find out at the end of that film that he was acting the whole time, and he was acting as not an actor. So of course the performance was going to be stilted because he was playing somebody that he, wasn't as a non-actor. And I was just like, oh my God, he's the fucking greatest actor ever. So, I mean, I love Mark Ruffalo, and the scene where she comes in and she's like, maybe you should stay, and he just starts crying right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I break down there every time. And it's just one of those things that I feel is so real in that movie. So I can't say enough about Mark Ruffalo. You're spot on with your assessment of his performance in this film.
And even like little touches, like when he's walking up to the diner and Sammy's inside, the cinematography, it's like shot through the window, like from his perspective. So you feel him literally on the outside looking in. And little things like that really helps you understand where he's coming from and how he has dealing with his own sense of guilt and it's just a genius performance. And Terry makes a lot of terrible decisions in the movie, but that's the thing, they both do. And even when he's doing, stupid things, taking his nephew out like to a bar to like hustle people out of on playing pool and things like that, you're with him. You're still on his side, and you know that he's not. Everything is coming from he's got a good heart and he's trying to do the right thing. But he's also emotionally stunted in a way, and he's never really matured in some ways from when his parents passed away and just dealing with that trauma.
Right.
It's just,
right. Exactly right.
He's just so great in that. The scene with them in the diner, I keep going back to that, but that's like such a showcase for the two of them and the way that they play off of each other, and how when he starts to talk about, oh, well, I ran into some trouble, and you can see the expression on her face that she's already crushed, like she knows what's about to come, and then the walls come up and she's like, what do you need, money? That whole thing, so great. I just feel like we could just gush about that one scene over and over. That's why I keep going back to it.
I will comment on that scene specifically. When you are uncomfortable watching that scene, I mean, that's a perfect testament to how great the scene is, because it is extremely uncomfortable. He's like shuffling, looking. She's like, are you expecting someone? He's like, who would I be expecting? And she's like, I don't know. You're looking around. He's like, I was just hoping maybe get a beverage, And then she just looks at him like, all right, what's going on? And then he finally breaks down and tells her, and it's so uncomfortable to watch. So that, to me, you're right. It is one of the pinnacle scenes, if not the pinnacle scene of the film.
And it's not that he doesn't love his sister or love his nephew. It's that he's just, I think his thing is that he's so scared of putting himself out there because of what happened with his parents, that he's just like, no, I'm just going to come here. I'm going to get what I need. I'm going to get the hell out and keep rolling down that hill wherever it may take me. And I think, and it's great. It's a great scene. I feel like we should move on to something else, but there's a lot to touch on. Because then she's like, do you ever go to church anymore? And then that whole thing where she's just trying to help him put down roots, which is the exact thing he doesn't want to do.
No, Sammy, I don't. Why?
Yeah.
Because I think it's ridiculous.
So
it's a great scene. One of the ones in great scenes in cinematic history.
Yeah, I by all rights, he should have been at least nominated for this. But we should probably also talk about Matthew Broderick, who is about as far away from Ferris Bueller, obviously his most famous role, as possible. And apparently he was childhood friends with Kenneth Lonergan. He was the first one on the project. And, he was signed on for this before anybody else. So what did you think about, I guess when the first time you saw this, what did you think about Matthew Broderick's kind of, again, he's also in Election, which is, I told you before we call, the double disc, the double DVD that I got this on. So let's talk about Matthew Broderick in this a little.
Yeah. So when I first saw the movie, did not know about the connection. I do now, clearly, but I thought that he was the stunt actor thrown in just to get people to pay attention. Now, obviously, his performance lent more to it than that. Do I think that he's the only one that could play that role? I do not.
Right.
As far as the importance to the film goes, you have, in my opinion, it goes Mark Ruffalo, Laura Linney, and then the kid.
Rory Culkin. Yeah, the
Rory
youngest
Culkin.
of the three big Culkins.
I think those three are what make it go. Mm-hmm. Everybody else could be manipulated. I wouldn't do it because I love how the film ultimately ended up. But Matthew Broderick, departure for him. We already mentioned the scene where he's like, kind of like tells her, I prefer you find another way to get your son to and from. And then he's like, how old is he? Oh, he's 8. Oh, what a great age. Like, you can just, and they cut to her, and she's just like, you prick. Like, the look on her face is just like, wow, this is unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, he's great.
I feel like casting him.
Typical Matthew.
I feel like casting him is sort of the movie kind of lulling us into, Matthew Broderick. He's always plays a kind of, upbeat, kind of nice guy kind of thing in movies. I'm sure he's gonna, be an ally to Sammy. And nope, not really, not so much. He's in this movie has an antagonist that isn't their own inner demons. It's probably him because he's one of the, I'd say the most, or if not one of the only unsympathetic characters in the movie where you're like, there's not much from that character that you're like, oh, I understand where he's coming from. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of this situation. I'm going to, I'm going to use I guess you have a little bit of sympathy for him because it seems like his wife really hates him. But then every time we see him, he's kind of a dick. So I guess we understand. I don't know.
See, my take on him in this film is once I saw the relationship between he and his wife was that his character was trying to create a sexual tension in the office from the moment they got there. And perhaps that's why he ended up having to leave his previous job.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, those are just thoughts that I had because, there's no hesitation on his part once it gets there. And then he's all about it and wanting to keep going, calling her, while his wife's sitting right next to him, It's just, to me, it feels like he was the instigator and he had the plan to do that all along. Maybe it wasn't with her specifically, but he was going to get somebody involved in that situation. So maybe that's just one take. Sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. He does immediately start pushing her buttons as soon as he can and trying to twist twist the situation and I don't know, really micromanaging in a very obnoxious kind of way. I also I wanted to point out, again, with the misdirection, there's that part where she's freaking out and she asks Terry to pick her son up from school, and we think he didn't show up, and then the camera pans over and he's sitting there in the car. Little things like that. Again, we're the movie's toying with our expectations of where we think it's going to go. And I love that. It's always one step ahead of where we would assume or how we would assume these characters are, because our all natural inclination is to want to put them into little boxes. This guy is the rebel, and this guy, and this is whatever. And I think this whole point of the movie is to blur those lines to the point that we're like, wow, everybody's fucked up in different ways. Which again, to your point, is how real life is how people really are. It's everybody's dealing with whatever baggage that they have in their past.
Yep. I think one of my favorite scenes is when he takes the kid to the bar and then tells him not to tell, and they get caught on the stairs. He's like, hey, we just lost track of time. There's just the way he says it, and then they start laughing. He's like, you were a bad kid. The interaction between Mark Ruffalo and Rory Culkin is what makes his performance go to me. Like, I can't get enough of that.
Yeah. It's like we were out stargazing, I think he said.
Yeah.
And it's like, and she buys it for a while too. She's like, oh, did your uncle show you, this constellation or whatever? And
the kid lies. He's like, yeah, we saw that one.
Oh, and it's so heartbreaking later on where he blows up at the kid because he assumes that he ratted him out to his mom.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great scene.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, but I also laugh because he kind of hits him once he's out of the car. He hits him like real quick.
Yeah.
And I don't know, hitting kids isn't funny, but for whatever reason, that's funny to me.
Well, I think
just how he does it.
I think in a way it's because, as we were saying, Terry is so emotionally stunted that it's kind of like one kid hitting another, like, I'm mad at you right now, that kind of thing. Like it reads that way, which is why it never comes across. Even when he's yelling at him, it doesn't really feel like child abuse or anything serious. It's just like, these two friends are having a spat. Never mind, one's like 35 or whatever he's supposed to be, and one is like 10. Because there are moments where he's trying to be a good uncle. He puts a seatbelt on him. He's trying to look out for him, but he doesn't. He's not emotionally equipped for the job, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So,
I mean, that holds true. The whole seatbelt thing. His parents died in the car wreck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would make sense that he would try and get the kid to wear his
exactly.
seatbelt.
I love the conversation there where he's like, "Oh, my." my mom's her parents died. Right. He's like, yeah, they were my parents too. She's my sister. Yeah, exactly. That's funny. I love it. He's like, and then Mark Ruffalo does the kind of with the eyes while he's driving. Great stuff. Let's see. And apparently, Sammy was really wild and kind of like that conversation at the table. Do we want to talk about her relationship with, I guess the whatever triangle there is with Sammy and Brian and Bob at all?
Yeah.
Let's get into that. So what is kind of your read of that situation? Why she is handling it the way she is? And I just feel bad for Bob in this situation. Like, he's such a
poor Bob
pretty much is like the big takeaway from this movie. It's like he really cares about her, and she's like, no, I don't need you right now. I'm good. When I'm in the mood, I'll call you up for basically a booty call, essentially, so I can feel good about myself. What are your thoughts on that whole thing and how she's just really good at complicating her own life, basically?
Poor Bob's the pushover. His introduction into the film is clearly they've been away from each other for some time, and she calls him up to get advice about a situation. And that situation is Rudy wants to write a story about his dad. And so he's like, comes across as the not emotionally supportive because he has no idea what to say. And like, all she wants is for him to tell her what to do. And he just says, I'm happy to give it some thought. She's like, okay. Like, you can tell her disappointment in that answer. So while Bob is in love with her, he never says the right thing for her because what she needs from him, he's not capable because he's not close enough to the situation on a regular basis to be able to give an analysis.
Right.
So Bob's biggest problem is the fact that he's not as involved as he wants to be, and he can't be because she won't let him, but she requires the information as if he were. And that is the whole crux of Bob's problem throughout the thing, because he still remains supportive. Even though he doesn't know what to do, he's willing to do whatever. But he just doesn't have the answers on the drop of a hat. So she keeps repeatedly coming to him. And then when he puts the pressure on her of marriage, that's when she had too much. And she decides, maybe she doesn't decide, but allows herself to be manipulated by Brian as a way to be like, oh, well, I was going to marry you, but, you know, I had an affair with my boss. So she's going to use that as a scapegoat later on down the road so that he doesn't want to marry her anymore. I mean, it all comes together quite clearly, to me at least, how that situation arose.
Right. Yeah, you can't have Bob check in with Bob like once a month and be like, what do you think, Bob? Like, I don't know what the hell's going on, dude.
Right.
It's once again, it's her way of kind of pushing people away too and keeping them at an arm's length. And, you know, she goes to see the priest to kind of confess. What is, you know, I think it's even in the trailer. She's like, what is the church's stance on adultery? And he's like, we're against it. And she's like she's looking for a way out from a situation that she it's a weird form of self-sabotage. It's like she wants someone to, you know, she wants a sense of belonging. She wants kind of, you know, that connection, but then she doesn't want it. She wants to continue running her household unopposed. She's gotten very kind of set in her ways, I think, in the way that she's raising her son. And I think she, in a way, wants to not have to parent both Rudy and Terry, but in a way, I think she gets off on the power trip of it too.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe if Bob made a mistake, it's the fact that he saw her reaching out and he, rather than let it go over a length of time before proposing, he latched on before she could put distance between them again. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's no maybe about it. Obviously they've had years of history, and she's like, you know, 2 years ago I would have said yes. But I mean, the fact that he jumped in after like maybe once or twice seeing her after all that time might have been his downfall as well.
Mm-hmm. And with Sammy and her love life, we get that one of the great Sammy Terry scenes outside where I think they're drinking a beer and they're
yes.
the heart to heart, and she's like, I fucked my boss, and he's like freaking out on her, and that's a great moment too.
Yeah. Like, holy shit, Sammy.
And if he's saying it, then you know it's legit.
Right, exactly.
And then even he tries to be the sort of the man of the house in a way, because he feels bad about her calling the plumber, and he's trying to do things himself. He's trying to prove himself useful, I guess, and try and like earn his keep, I guess, in a way. But again, he's not equipped for it. This is basically a movie about a bunch of people trying to do stuff that they're not emotionally prepared to do, I think.
Right. And that goes down to even when he takes the kid to see his father, he forces his father into a situation he's not emotionally equipped to handle. Like, he had no idea they're coming there. Maybe circumstances would have been different had he, you know, called him or had any idea that they were coming to see him.
Right.
But that would jolt anybody, I would think. For sure.
And again, I think in Terry's mind, he's trying to shock Rudy into realizing his father's an asshole and that he's better off without him. But it goes about it completely the wrong way. And to see Josh Lucas in there, which was kind of random, playing Rudy Sr.
Yeah, he looks just like the kid, though.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, I see him and I'm like, how could you say that's not your kid? That is your kid. Like,
Rudy, meet like, Rudy.
Yeah,
literally. That becomes a whole, and that becomes really I think the final straw, where I think I watched a featurette, and I believe it was Kenneth Lonergan himself who said something about writing a story about a woman torn between saving her brother and protecting her son. And I think that's really where it comes down to, well, you've got to go, because obviously I need to do what's best for my child. So I can't kind of save both of you at the same time. I have to choose, essentially. And it puts her in this kind of difficult situation of her child and her man-child brother, and them trying to, I guess, sort of heal each other in a way. But because you even have earlier in the movie where like Terry is he's mad at Rudy, so he goes back on planning to take him fishing, and then at the last minute he shows up. It's kind of, again, emotionally, Terry's being emotionally manipulative in that moment, where he's like, no, I'm going to hold this back, and then when I bring it back at the end, it's kind of, I'll kind of paint myself as kind of a savior in a way. You know what I mean? It's like he sets his own expectations of how other people see him, but he's constantly, I guess, selling himself short. What is your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, I think the answer to that question is all in the look on Laura Linney's face when she's standing on the church steps and he pulls up and he puts the fishing pole out. I mean, she's just like, do we cuss on this podcast? I should ask.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did a few times. Go for it.
She's like, just the look on her face. She's standing right next to the preacher who's played by Kenneth Lonergan. Lonergan. And it's just like, you motherfucker. like she's happy that he's doing it, but she's like, only Terry can get away with this manipulation.
Right.
Where it's okay now. It's 2:00 in the afternoon. All the fish are not going to be biting. This should have happened, hours ago. But since Terry decided, she's like, I can't tell my kid no, because I know that will crush him. Mm-hmm. I can't lecture Terry because he's finally come around to do what I ultimately wanted him to do. But she's like, just the look on her face answers your question.
Yeah, she's kind of trapped in that moment.
For sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned Kenneth Lonergan playing the priest. He has one of the best scenes as well. I mean, we keep saying that a lot. I guess that's a testament to how strong the film is, that this every other scene is like one of the best scenes, but he's got that great sort of, I think it's kind of a monologue to them about trying to kind of feel Terry out about his religious beliefs and all this other stuff, where he says, I'm looking it up on IMDb, and he's like, he's talking about his job. A lot of people come to see me with all kinds of problems, drugs, alcohol, blah, blah. And he's like, great job you got. And then he's talking about like,
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. That kind of thing. I love all this stuff. And Terry, it's telling him, he's like, I don't particularly think anybody's life has any particular importance besides whatever we arbitrarily give it, which is fine. And he goes on about like kind of feeling hopeless, like all of it all means something and doesn't mean anything at the same time. And I think that, again, is really just him kind of crying out for a home, basically, in a way. And I think the movie is ultimately about the two of them finding that with each other, because, as I said sort of at the top of the show, no one will understand. Yes, if even people that have had tragedy understand what they've gone through, but no one is in their shoes but them, and no one experienced that shared loss that they do. And I think that's maybe ultimately that's about this movie appeals to both of us having siblings, is that we get that. Like, we both, siblings were born to the same parents, they're raised in ultimately, more or less the same environment, and nobody's going to see the world from a similar perspective as you are, because you came from the exact same place, and you experienced throughout your formative years almost everything kind of exactly the same. You react to it differently, like the movie goes into, but I think it's that bond that, even though Terry and Sammy are such different people, that connects them and holds them together.
Yeah. To me, that scene, the one that you were talking about, it resonates for me because I'm pretty much philosophically the same as Terry in that regard, where he's like, I don't know, a lot of what you're saying has real appeal to me. A lot of the stuff they told us when we were kids, but I don't want to believe in something or not believe in it because I might feel bad. Like, to me, that just sums up so much of Terry's existence. I mean, I didn't live the life Terry lived, but he's like, I want to believe in it because it's true or not. And then he's like, I want to think my life's important or connected to something. And then Ron says, well, isn't there a way for you to believe that without calling it God or religion or whatever it is that you object to? And then he's like, shit, yeah, I guess I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is a perfect ending to that scene.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and so many of these scenes, like even standalone, are just not only showing off what Ruffalo and Linney can do, but they feel like their own sort of standalone statements in a way. And I think that scene's the perfect example. Actually, on on the special features, I think they said that this movie started as a one-act play. That lunch scene that we were talking about earlier, that was the one-act play. That was like all centered on that. And I think that's probably why that scene kind of encapsulates everything that this movie is trying to say in a way.
So good. Like,
yeah, it's great.
They could have used any of these clips for their Oscar clips. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when they showed the little clip before they announced the winner, like any of these scenes.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. Like when he's talking to the kid in the bedroom, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" I have no idea. After he just went on this long rant.
It's good stuff.
Like, did you find yourself laughing a lot? Like, this is not a comedy by any stretch, but I find myself laughing a lot at the things Terry does and says, and even the stuff that Laura Linney's character does.
Oh yeah, she was making, as we sort of alluded to, some of her decisions were so maddening that I'm just watching like, what is happening? Why are you doing this right now? Leave Bob alone. First of all, poor Bob needs to find someone that'll appreciate him and get his own life. But no, yeah, I agree with you, because Ruffalo's character is so all over the place that you can't help but kind of empathize with him and laugh along with his reactions with him and the kid, because that is so much the focus of the movie. Like, it's as much about him and his nephew as it is about him and his sister. And to your point about how it's not a comedy, I think, Jerry Maguire is one of my favorite movies because it's a comedy, but it's not a comedy. Like, the most realistic genre of movies are these sort of comedy drama hybrids, because that's what real life is. There's no aliens, there's no superheroes, there's no slashers or anything in real life. I mean, there are, but not superheroes or aliens, but like there are elements of those that are in real life sometimes. But generally life is more like this. It's more kind of mundane. People making shitty decisions, but trying to do the best with the hand that they're dealt. And I think that's refreshing to see on screen. Especially when this kind of low to mid-budgeted film is feel like you have to really kind of hunt them down now. They're not making as much of these kinds of movies, I guess.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir. Drama is by far my favorite genre of film. And like most people that know me, they would never guess that, because they would be like, oh, he's a comedy guy or he's a horror guy because I'm in the podcast. But honestly, this is the most difficult movie type to pull off and get right, is tell a piece of someone's life story. And Jerry Maguire is another perfect example of someone doing that masterfully. Mm-hmm. I mean, like Peanut Butter Falcon, I know that we talked about that earlier. If you ever want to do that, I'm
absolutely. No, I got you.
Game for that. But those are their life stories. They don't hinge on explosives or CGI or any, manipulation of, wow, look what we can do.
Right. Yeah, because you're literally seeing life from a perspective that's not your own, but there's always these universal truths that anybody can connect to. Like you would as we were saying, we both have our parents, we don't have sister, but we have this connections. There's elements of this film that we're emotionally latching onto. And that's why I think, it resonates so heavily with you specifically, and I think it's a really good, it's a great movie, and it's does a lot with a very relatively small. I mean, this movie was only made for like $1 million, and it made like $9 million, I think, domestically, which is a huge profit. But again, it's not the kind of movie that people will necessarily talk about in the same way, unless people like us keep talking about it, I guess. It wasn't even, like I said, it wasn't even streaming anywhere. Now I think it's on Prime, but when I went to watch it for the podcast, it wasn't streaming anywhere, that I had to seek out a DVD copy of it. And I think that's also a testament to the importance of physical media too, by the way.
Yes. Because I can pass it around to anybody.
Exactly.
That I tell about it.
Yeah.
I've shown this film to like 10 or 15 people.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about having a Wi-Fi connection, or whether Netflix's licensing deal all of a sudden expires and things like that. So that's why, I'm really inspired to go and pick up Dr. Sleep on Blu-ray now that we're talking about physical media, and we talked about that movie earlier. Just a few more things I wanted to talk about here. I did think the thing with Mabel and like the bizarre neon colors on her screen, I did think that was funny as well. And that's actually Kenneth Lonergan's wife playing Mabel.
Yeah.
Which I thought was super interesting.
And that was her idea, to have that part in there for the screens.
Really? I didn't hear that part. I didn't get a chance to listen to the commentary, but I probably need to go back and do that. I'd love to hear what he has to say about this. Let's see. Martin Scorsese also was executive producer and really kind of, I think, safeguarded Lonergan's vision so that he could tell the story the way he wanted. And of course, I wanted to talk about the goodbye scene with the two of them I think it's out by the car, right?
Yeah.
Where they don't even like, Lonergan is so low key with his storytelling that they don't even, like, I was expecting them to say the line, the titular line of the movie, and they don't even say that.
Yeah.
You know, it's implied and we get it and we don't need it spelled out for us. It's not like, it's not like every movie where you're waiting for that. There's a Family Guy. I used to watch Family Guy, not for a long time, but there's a Family Guy joke where he's like, I think Peter Griffin says something like, "Oh, it's like that scene in the movie where they say the name of the movie and I forget what it is, and then you cut to like him in a movie theater and I forget what movie he was playing and he's like, he said it or whatever, and like Lonergan doesn't even like indulge in that kind of cliche in this, and I thought that was really, it was a really classy way of ending the movie and tying it together, where both of them now recognize how important they are to each other's lives, and you believe they think that they're going to try and be better with each other, to each other. I mean, where do you kind of see their story going on from here after the credits roll?
Honestly, I think it's more of the exact same that we've been through, because keep in mind, this is just a section of their existence. It's been going on this way for 30 years. I mean, what happened in this time frame that's going to change any of that? I mean, he constantly has been disappointing her for the last 30 years. Do we think he's all of a sudden reformed? I honestly don't. I think he's the same Terry that he was throughout the whole movie, and that's life. Yeah, we don't always change. You know what I mean? And I think the fact that you said that neither one of them said "you can count on me" in the film, they didn't need to, because it's implied that they both are saying it, which gives us satisfaction. But I mean, if I'm being honest, he's still going to be a fuck up on down the road. And he's talking about, we'll get together for Christmas. He's saying that because that's what she needs to hear. Mm-hmm. And she's still not, with Bob, that wasn't resolved 100%. She's like, we'll talk about it, was the last real thing. And then she called him up again when the kid was, taken by the police, when Mark Ruffalo was roughed up and put in jail.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, I love it because it's a timestamp and nothing really has changed. Yeah. I mean, you could write the next portion of it and it would be just as entertaining, because it would have the same type of follies that we watched for an hour and a half.
It would be the next time Terry comes to town. You can still count on me. And it would be a different set of mischief. But yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm trying to be more optimistic, and I trying to think that they have at least a little bit more understanding of where the other's coming from. But ultimately, that doesn't mean their behavior is going to change in any way.
Right. I mean, and I think that's why they are showing the sadness, because they know nothing has really changed. Yeah. I mean, do they feel closer? They probably feel closer every time they get together, just because that's nature. That's how people are. It's like, we saw each other for a couple days. That'll last us until the next time we see each other for a couple days, but nothing really changes. Yeah. I mean, he's going to go home to that girl and they're still going to have the same trouble. What trouble was it? Was she pregnant? We don't know.
Yeah, they know. They don't tell us. Yeah, they don't. He doesn't give us any answers.
And I love that. I love that. Like, there's so much that's left to your own devices in this film. And I think it's cool that it has a little bow on it for you. I think that's great. I hope that my commentary doesn't ruin or take that away from you. But I feel like they just didn't. I mean, nothing's changed.
I see it as more of a baby step than like a and I think you get a little bit of that at the end of Manchester by the Sea as well. That like the Casey Affleck character and the Lucas Hedges character are maybe starting to understand each other. Maybe their relationship will improve. We don't know, and it doesn't answer that for us. So it ends with a hopeful ellipses, not a period at the end of the sentence. Basically, is kind of my thing. And so I like to imagine things will maybe marginally improve, but I mean ultimately we don't know. And then I think the not knowing is what makes it such a realistic ending, and in that way more satisfying than had he had this big, epiphany and been like, "You're right, Sammy. From now on, things are going to be different." That would have false with the movie that we were watching the whole time. And it would have been, the cop out Hollywood like sellout ending. So I ultimately like the way it ends. It's just I like to think people can make incremental steps. But even so, it doesn't mean that things aren't solved by the end of the credits. And I think that's frustrating because life is frustrating, but satisfying in that it just feels true to the story Lonergan's telling. Yeah.
Cool. And I can't say enough about that ending, especially when the kid gets on the bus. He does that little crinkle on his face like he's going to cry again.
Yeah.
And but then he holds it together because he doesn't want the kid to see it, And then when he ultimately says his goodbye to Sammy, he's saying all the things that she wants to hear, and she's accepting it like it's all going to be different. And that obviously there's growth between the characters in this film. Otherwise, that we wouldn't have any kind of, anything to latch onto. So when I say things are exactly the same, they're clearly not. There's been emotional changes in the characters, and there's, Terry knows the kid now, so he has a reason to come back because he wasn't all that close with him before this meeting. So,
right. But the cycle of behavior will continue.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
I feel like we've kind of exhausted the analysis here. Is there anything about You Can Count on Me that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we mention?
I can't think of anything that we haven't really mentioned. We mentioned pretty much all the characters in the film.
Yeah.
And what they mean to the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many great scenes. Turn it on at any point, you're going to watch a great scene.
Yeah, pretty much. And I encourage people to check it out if like me, they've heard about it, because I remembered when, I was watching the Oscars when she was nominated, and I just never got around to. It was one of those movies that I have. If I made a list of all the movies I've been meaning to get to, I would never live. I would never sleep or do anything else. I'd just be catching up on movies. That's one of the great things about having this show is getting a chance, having an excuse to finally catch up, with some of these films that I've been meaning to watch for a while. So thank you for bringing this one to the table.
Yeah, of course. I guess there's one thing that this is what movies mean to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I told you, I can't really tell you why this movie is just stuck in my head like one of my favorite things ever to exist on the planet. But I was dating this girl once. I said, I got this movie I want you to check out. So we watched it. She didn't like it or not like it, but she was like, "Why did you show me that?" And I was just like, "All right, I'm sad now. We're done." It's like if you don't get it, if you don't get it, that's okay. But like if you don't get that it means something to somebody else, then maybe maybe we're not meant to be.
Right.
So that kind of sucked, and I'll always have that memory too. But that stuff matters. Have you had that ever happen to you? Something like that where you decided to show somebody something and they're just like, I don't get it.
Yeah. No.
How could you not get that?
And that's the great thing about any form of art, including cinema, is that it has that objectivity to it. And that's why when I have guests on the show, I encourage them to pick something of their own, pick one of their movies, because you get to know the guest by having them pick something that speaks to them. And I think that's why you see these things on like film Twitter all the time being like 10 movies, like it's going around now, 10 movies to get to know me or whatever, because you put those together and it does give you some indication of the kind of person that you are, and that what you value in life, or what you find interesting, what you're drawn to naturally, and I think I think this was a great pick, and one that hopefully listeners who haven't seen this will check out on Amazon Prime or wherever if they have to track it down, because I think the performances and the writing are kind of next level. And, you know, it's unfortunate that I feel like it's in a lot of ways kind of gotten forgotten by some people, because I hadn't, you know, this is not one you ever hear really talked about.
No, I'm glad that you liked it. I mean, to me, just bringing it up and the fact that you watched it because of this, that means the world to me, and I'm glad that you get it. They obviously took away some of the things that I took away from it as well.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
Cool. That's cool.
Awesome. So, Dames Marvs, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, on Twitter, you want to follow the CF3 podcast. I'm on Twitter personally at Caravarus, just how it sounds, Karavarus. It's listed as Dames Marvs, but they won't let me change it. So Dames Marvs on Facebook, CF3 on Facebook, and yeah, I'll be there. I'll respond to you.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show and getting me to finally watch You Can Count on Me. And I have you marked down for the Peanut Butter Falcon. So next time we have you on, we'll definitely talk about that one, because that was another movie much more recent that I also really enjoyed. And I think there's a lot to dig into there as well.
Yes, you can count on me.
Nice. Well done. All right. Thanks, James.
Thanks a lot, my friend.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.